Hey everybody, welcome to Fortis and Fide. In this video today, I'm going to be showing you guys just some footage of my jiu-jitsu practice. I just want to let you guys know, I am not a competitive jiu-jitsu player. I'm pretty casual, so you're going to see me get smashed, tapped, submitted a lot. That's just the way it is, and actually that's the way it should be, honestly. If you're training, you want people who are better than you all the time. That way you have room to grow. If you're ever training and you just submit everybody and have no challenge, then you know what's the point, right? You don't grow from that. So a lot of this footage is going to be me making mistakes, especially you guys that do jiu-jitsu, just like that one right there. But the purpose of the video is just to kind of give you guys something interesting to see, while at the same time talking a little bit about the faith and some reflections I have. So today I want to talk about Naaman. Now, if you don't know who Naaman is, Naaman, he comes from the book of Kings. And he was a commander of an army, so he was like a well-known soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, the thing is with Naaman is that he was really desperate for getting rid of his leprosy. He wanted to find a cure, and at the time, Elijah, everyone heard that Elijah was a man of God, and Elijah could cure him, right? So he goes to Elijah and says, "Hey, I want to be cured. What can I do?" And Elijah is like, just go wash yourself 8 times. Go wash yourself 8 times and you'll be cured, right? And Naaman was upset with that answer. He didn't want that. He wanted like an instant miracle. He wanted some miraculous thing to happen. And he ended up just getting told to essentially take a bath, right? And the thing is that Elijah, one of the things that Elijah did that kind of annoyed Naaman is the fact that he told him to specifically wash in the Jordan, right? And, there's rivers closer to him, and he considered them better, right? Even it says in verse 12 that are not Abana and Parfar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel, right? Couldn't I wash them and be cleansed? But Naaman's servants told him, said, "Hey, you should just do this. Do whatever he tells you, as Our Lady," which kind of foreshadows, Our Lady telling the servants at the wedding of Cana, Mary saying, "Hey, listen to do whatever he tells you," referring to Jesus, right? And there's a lot of similarities between Elijah and Jesus, even the same miracles that he performed. But anyway, he listened, right? He decided, okay, fine, I guess I will. And then, guess what? He got cured by doing the thing. And the lesson for this is because I think a lot of us, we will look for, we'll ask God, we'll say things like, if you can only just give me this one miracle, I'll believe, right? Or I want to see something that's miraculous in front of my eyes, and then I will believe. But the truth is that there's a lot of value in simplicity and in the ordinary, right? We can see God in ordinary things. We don't necessarily need, necessarily the big things to happen, right? And I think this is a lesson for all of us too, because the very fact that we exist, the very fact that we are on this earth is incredible, right? We didn't exist unless God willed it to happen. If we can't will ourselves into existence. There's nothing we can possibly do without God. Like, there's no beginning without a cause, right? This is why I think atheism is quite ridiculous, to be honest with you, because and there was a point in my life where I was having atheistic thoughts, and I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? To think that the universe came out of pure chance, that there's no reason to exist, and we're just all flesh and no soul, it's absurd, right? We are different than animals. Like, we are not the same as animals. Sure, we have similar functions as an animal, but we're different than every other creature, and I think it's like that for a reason, because we're made in the image and likeness of God, right? And I think the atheistic viewpoint of there's no purpose, there's no reason to exist, it's all just by chance, it's a very pessimistic way to view life, right? And there's a very good argument. I mean, I wouldn't say it's an argument, but it comes from a mathematician, a Catholic mathematician. His name is escaping me. But basically he said, okay, well, if you are an atheist and you're correct, okay, well, what do you have to lose? Well, if there's truly nothing after death, then there's nothing after death, right? and let's say you lived as a Christian, but the atheists were right, well, then you really have nothing to lose. You still lived a good life, right? Being a Christian isn't a bad life. It's a pretty good life, right? Because you are at least aligning yourself to values and morals that are going to make you happy, right? And you're going to forgive people. You're not going to hold on to grudges. A lot of moral things that are going to help you out. But if you're an atheist, right, and the Christians are right, and you live your entire life living in a way that's not conducive to being received into heaven, then you're in for a big surprise, right? You're in for a lot of trouble. So even if you look at religion in that way, like if we recognize this, Jesus was a real person. He existed. It's not. In fact, out of all the people written in history, he is the most written about. Why would people write about someone who didn't exist unless what he did was true and miraculous and people couldn't believe what they saw, right? And there's even other accounts of Jesus outside the Bible, right? We have Josephus, historian, right? We have, Romans during the time who wrote about Jesus, right? Who wrote about his followers, wrote about Christians. And to say that he didn't exist is a weird argument to me. I don't understand where that argument came from, and it's very bizarre. And I think it's honestly because it's hard to look at what Jesus did in the Gospels and and realize that it's true. Like, it's hard because it's like, wow, this is so miraculous. I've never seen anything like this in my life. How can it be true, right? And even when we look at things like as recent as Fatima, like Our Lady of Fatima, that happened in the 1920s. That was, thousands of people witnessed this event. They witnessed the sun dancing in the sky and seeing Our Lady in the sky. And it's one thing if one person hallucinates. It's another if thousands of people hallucinate. That's a bit absurd, right? And, we live in a culture where, it makes sense why the culture is becoming more and more anti-Christian. Like, it's becoming more and more anti-family, anti-Catholicism, quite frankly. And it's because if you admit that Catholicism is true, if you admit that Jesus rose from the dead, there is a heaven, there is a hell, then it's going to be a very big inconvenience if you don't live your life according to those principles, right? Now, is this to condemn anyone who doesn't believe? Like, for someone who honestly never, never became a Christian? No, of course, I'm not saying that. There's always levels of culpability, right? But if you were someone that grew up Christian or grew up a Catholic and you abandoned your faith, like, you're going to be more liable for what's in judgment, right? And I'm not saying this to judge. I'm just saying this to kind of give you a wake up call if you're in that position, because for me, for a lot of my life, especially when I went to college, I started to really neglect my faith. I started to really kind of give in to the ways of the world, right? And I try to find God in other things. I try to find God in success. I try to find God in money. I try to find God in women. I was putting everything else on a pedestal, and even the very names of Jesus and Mary were just kind of repulsive to me. Like, they were kind of repulsive to me, and I never understood why until I realized that I was so deep in sins that I just couldn't bear to say their names, because their names have power. The name of Jesus has power, right? And maybe you're in this position where you hear someone mention Jesus and it makes you a little uncomfortable, right? And I that's when I realized that too. Now, I want to show you guys something really cool. This is one of my training partners, Phil, and he had something really interesting to say about twin boys.
That was a congratulatory leg move.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. I always learn something new every day. when I'm training over here, not just on the mat, but just different interesting facts like that too. Now, I want to say this too. If you're watching this and you're like looking and be like, "Wow, I'm getting my butt kicked all the time," that's what makes jiu-jitsu so fun. It really is. It's one of those activities and those sports and those martial arts where you're always getting tested, right? One thing I tell my students is that sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. In fact, most of the time you're going to be the nail, right? And if you're the nail constantly, that means you're in a good gym. That means the coach is pushing you, and you're getting pushed to a point where you're only going to improve and get better. And I find that that's so similar to the spiritual life, right? Like, once you acquire one virtue, through the grace of God, and you've overcome it, there's going to be another thing that creeps up, right? And for me, one of the things that I struggled with a lot growing up was the virtue of chastity. Like, I really had a hard time with that one. Just kind of getting into the whole, promiscuous culture. Unfortunately, it just kind of got into me. But as I, spent years fighting that off, what ended up happening is that I developed other vices, that kind of almost take the place of it. And and that's just something important to remember, that we're called the church militant for a reason. Okay, we're constantly in a battle. We're constantly fighting to do God's will, because Satan, more than anything, he wants to see us fall. He wants to see us go down. And with the grace of God, and through prayer, through sacraments, through perseverance and overcoming challenges, it will make you stronger, right? As St. Paul teaches, he says, put on the armor of God, put on the armor of Christ. And, that's something to always keep in mind. And that's something that I feel like needs to be taught a little bit more in our culture, is this idea of virtue, right? Because, when we die, we're not going to take anything. We don't take anything with us. We don't take our house. We don't take our car. We don't take our money. We don't even take our skills. Like the skills I learned in jiu-jitsu, I'm not going to take it with me. But what I will take, and this is just, a belief of Catholicism, is that you will take your virtues with you, right? Your character will come with you, right? You're not just going to be an empty soul. Like, you're going to be a soul that's crowned with different virtues that you've allowed God to work with you. And I think some people make this misunderstanding about Catholicism. They think that we somehow are earning our way into heaven, right? And that's not at all what we believe. We don't believe that we merit anything. What we do believe is that by simply aligning ourselves to the virtues and fighting for them, we're simply doing what God asks of us to do. He wants all of us to perfect all the virtues. That's his desire for us. And when we are growing in holiness, we're simply doing what we've been asked to do, right? And there's a beautiful parable that Jesus explains this whole message, and it's the message of the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And this actually comes from Matthew chapter 20. And I'll go ahead and read the entire thing so that way you guys can kind of see it. And at first, even when I read it for the first time, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But then I started to realize, like, wait, no, it actually kind of does make sense, And it's a good defense for growing in virtue, right? And for this reason, and why we don't. Basically, when you grow in virtue, you're just doing what God intended for you to do anyways, right? So this comes from Matthew chapter 20. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and then sent them into his vineyard. About 9 a.m, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, 'You also go and work on my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went." Now, if you continue on with the story, what ended up happening is that the landowner starts to hire people later and later in the day, and then there's even one point where there's a guy who only, a group of people only work for a few hours, right? And what does he do? Well, he pays everybody the exact same thing, right? So the guys that were there since 9 a.m, they worked the entire day, and they got paid 1 denarii, just like everybody else, even the guy who worked 1 hour, right? Or a couple hours. Now, this is like, Jesus will often use like shock value in parables just to get people to remember and listen. And, this is one of the ones that I can remember because he does that, right? But it's also to show us an important message that whenever we're doing the will of God, right, it's not because we have earned it, right? It's not because we have earned it. It's simply because we're doing what God intended for us to do anyways, right? He intended for us to do it. And that's one of the messages that the Catholic Church teaches, is that, look, you have a place in heaven that God has assigned for you. He wants you to be the most holy person that you can possibly be, right? And he knows where you're going to end up, right? Now, out of his love, he gave us free will, right? So because of our free will, we can choose to not be as perfect, right? What does Jesus say? He says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And, his apostles are like, well, how is this even possible? And then Jesus says, with God, all things are possible, right? And without me, you can do nothing. So, when we're growing in virtue, what we're essentially doing is we're doing what God wanted us to do, right? We're doing what he asked of us anyways. And this is important for us to remember because, when we do God's will, first of all, it's not going to be easy. Obviously, it's going to be difficult. It's going to have struggles, and we're going to have to overcome temptations, and it's going to be not an easy life, right? That's what Jesus tells us when we pick up our cross. But at the same time, Jesus says that come all to me, you who are heavy burdened or heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My burden easy and my yoke is light, right? So we might have to endure things in this life that are going to be difficult, but at the end of the day, we're going to be happier for it, right? Think about all the martyrs. Think about all the saints who endured so much hardship. Why did they endure so much hardship? Well, it's because the Holy Spirit gave them the ability to endure those things because they saw a greater goal. They saw the value of virtue, right? They saw the value in it. And I think that's something our society desperately needs today. Like, we live in a culture where it's just, virtue isn't talked about, right? It's all about virtue signaling, right? It's all about how can I show people I'm virtuous without actually being virtuous, right? And a lot of virtue is hidden. Like, you don't really know about it. There's a lot of people who do nice things for people and nobody knows about it, and I get so annoyed when I see people do this whole like TikTok trend, and they're like showing off how they're like, helping out like someone in need, and it's like, okay, that's ridiculous. You don't need to show the world that. Just keep it between you and God. You don't need to do that because obviously they're chasing clout at that point, right? But that's a rant for another day. So hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. Hope you guys enjoy these kind of style of videos. If you do, just let me know. If you don't, let me know as well. So hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless.